Zireen Volda was a name once whispered in beauty circles with awe. Now it echoed through prison walls like a curse. Elira Bens was the ambitious whistleblower who never made it out of Zireen's luxury spa alive. Their names, forever entwined, marked the beginning of one of the most chilling true crime stories the beauty industry had ever concealed. What started as glamour, money and fame would unravel into blood, betrayal and a life sentence where reality hit harder than anyone could. Imagine Zireen Volda was the kind of woman people envied. Her name had become a brand in Coral Heights, a quiet coastal town known for its rich socialites and oceanfront villas. With long silver blonde hair, icy blue eyes and skin that looked almost airbrushed, she stood out in every room she entered. Her success story seemed straight out of a dream, rising from a modest background to owning one of the fastest-growing skincare companies in the state. Her product line, Glow Sanctum, was being sold in boutique stores across the country, and celebrities often praised her products online. Social media painted a picture of luxury: champagne brunches, tropical getaways, designer fashion, and a devoted online following that hung on her every word. But the image was a lie. Zireen had learned early on that beauty could be a weapon. She used her looks to gain influence, to win trust, and more importantly, to hide what she didn't want the world to see. She built her empire on secrecy, manipulation, and ruthless ambition. Behind the white marble walls of her Coral Heights mansion, she kept more than just business secrets. Financial records were buried under shell companies. Payments were made in cash to unlicensed chemists, and complaints from customers were silenced with legal threats or money. Unknown to most, Glow Sanctum wasn't as safe or revolutionary as Zireen claimed. The serums and creams were produced in an unregulated lab rented under a false name. The formulas, designed to deliver instant results, were laced with banned substances. Several users had developed rashes, burns, and long-term skin damage. When a young woman in Ohio was hospitalized with severe facial scarring, an investigation was quietly opened. Zireen, always 5 steps ahead, caught wind of it and quickly scrubbed her records. She even paid influencers to post fake recovery stories to bury the growing complaints. One person, however, refused to stay silent: Elira Bens. She wasn't just a former employee. She was Zireen's childhood friend, her earliest business partner, and the only person who knew everything. Together, they had started their journey selling homemade creams at flea markets and online forums. But as the money rolled in, their vision split. Elira wanted to stay ethical, while Zireen saw the potential to dominate the market, no matter the cost. After a heated falling out, Elira left the company and threatened to report the illegal operations to the authorities. Zireen didn't panic, at least not outwardly. She continued her online routine as if nothing had changed. Morning skincare videos, product launches, luxury spa tours. But behind the scenes, she was watching Elira's every move. Her lawyers sent cease and desist letters. Private investigators were hired to monitor her. And then something unexpected happened. A small beauty blog called Skin Deep Truth published a lengthy exposé. The article accused Zireen's company of using toxic ingredients, featuring anonymous sources and medical reports from harmed users. The author, Denzin, a little-known investigative blogger who had apparently been contacted by Elira. Article exploded online. Within 48 hours, Glow Sanctum was trending, but for all the wrong reasons. People began sharing their horror stories. Local news picked up the story. A consumer protection agency launched a formal inquiry. For the first time, Zireen's empire was starting to crumble. Yet, even with all the attention, Zireen didn't show any sign of fear. She posted a calm video denying the claims, calling it all a jealous smear campaign. Her loyal fans supported, her blindly posting comments filled with hearts and praise. But the pressure was growing. Major retailers began pulling her products from their shelves. Financial backers quietly backed out. Influencers deleted their endorsements. Then, just as things reached a boiling point, Elira disappeared. Her phone went dead. She missed appointments. Her family filed a missing persons report. And suddenly, the scandal around Zireen turned into something darker, something criminal. The police began looking into the connection. What started as a cosmetic controversy was now on the verge of turning into a homicide investigation. And all eyes were back on Zireen Volda, the woman who had everything, and maybe, just maybe, was willing to kill to keep it. Elira Bens was last seen on a rainy Tuesday evening. Security footage showed her pulling out of her driveway in her blue hybrid sedan, wearing a tan coat and holding a folder under her arm. That folder, according to her sister, contained documents related to Glow Sanctum, including supplier receipts, test results, and correspondence between her and Zireen. Elira had planned to meet with a journalist that night. She never arrived. Mentioned. The next morning, her phone was going straight to voicemail. Her apartment was untouched, keys still on the hook, cat food bowls full. At first, her family assumed she'd taken a short trip to clear her head. But 2 days later, her car was found abandoned along a desolate trail road just outside Coral Heights. The scene was disturbing. The driver's side door was slightly ajar, and the car had been wiped down. No fingerprints, no phone, and no folder. But there was blood on the steering wheel and a torn piece of Elira's coat on the passenger seat. Investigators feared the worst. The media picked up the story, and within hours, headlines exploded. Whistleblower missing amid beauty empire scandal. Reporters camped outside Zireen Volda's mansion, but she remained calm, even gracious. She posted a tribute to Elira on social media, calling her a brilliant friend and visionary, expressing sorrow and support for the family. To the public, Zireen was heartbroken, but to investigators, her performance raised red flags. Detectives began to review the timeline closely. They discovered that Zireen and Elira had exchanged a string of messages in the days leading up to her disappearance. The tone of the messages was tense. Elira was demanding Zireen come clean, threatening to expose everything. Zireen responded with vague assurances and requested a private meeting. Elira had agreed. Further digging revealed something else. Zireen's security system had a digital gap. For nearly 6 hours on the night Elira disappeared, footage from Tuputu, the spa's basement level, where Zireen conducted much of her product storage and packaging, was missing. The hard drive storing that footage had been wiped clean the next morning. When asked, Zireen claimed there had been a system malfunction. The search widened. Cadaver dogs were brought in. Dive teams checked nearby rivers. Volunteers combed the Forests surrounding the abandoned trail road. Nothing turned up. No body, no phone, no folder. But every clue pointed in one direction. Elira hadn't simply walked away. She had been silenced. Detectives looked into Zireen's phone records and found several late-night calls to a burner number. They traced it to a man named Colt Brenshaw, a former lab technician who had worked for Glow's Sanctum before abruptly quitting 6 months earlier. When police found him, Colt was living off-grid in a rundown trailer. He looked terrified. Initially hesitant to speak, he eventually told investigators that Zireen had contacted him about getting rid of evidence. Though he hadn't participated in anything illegal directly, Colt admitted to seeing chemical containers and a freezer unit in the spa basement. Things that didn't belong in a beauty business. As pressure mounted, a new piece of evidence broke the case wide open. A highway toll camera had captured Zireen's SUV near the forest, where Elira's car was later discovered. The timestamp placed her there just hours after the supposed meeting with Elira. Zireen had previously claimed she'd been home all night. Now her story was unraveling. With enough circumstantial evidence, a warrant was secured. Investigators raided the spa and Zireen's residence. They found more than they bargained for. In the spa basement, hidden behind a locked panel, was a room that had been kept cold, unusually cold. Inside was a large industrial freezer, secured with multiple locks. It was humming quietly, like it had been running for days. Detectives feared the worst, but prepared for the possibility that Elira's body was inside. The team called in forensic experts before opening the freezer. What they found was horrifying, but it only deepened the mystery. Inside were several containers labelled collagen serum and organic extracts. But their contents were not cosmetic. One of the containers held something that made a seasoned detective stumble back in. Shock, inside was a severed human hand, and tattooed on the wrist was a design Elira's sister immediately recognized. 3 stars and a moon, a symbol Elira had gotten at age 19. The hand was confirmed to be hers through DNA. Suddenly, it wasn't a missing persons case anymore. It was a murder investigation. And the prime suspect was the woman the world once worshipped for her beauty. The moment the human remains were found in the freezer, everything changed. The Coral Heights Police Department transitioned the case from a missing person investigation to a full-scale homicide probe. Forensic teams swarmed the spa, collecting samples, photographing every inch of the basement, and sealing off the building with crime scene tape. What had once been a luxury wellness destination now resembled the set of a horror film. And at the centre of it all was Zireen Volda, the once celebrated beauty mogul, now suspected killer. The evidence was damning. In addition to the severed hand, forensic analysts discovered traces of blood spatter on the walls and floor of the basement room, carefully wiped but not completely removed. Luminol testing revealed patterns consistent with a violent struggle. Drain pipes in the floor had been recently scrubbed with industrial bleach, and chemical residue matched solvents used to break down organic material. In a locked cabinet, they also found multiple syringes, anesthesia vials, and a sedative compound not approved for cosmetic use. Zireen had attempted to sanitize her crime scene, but the science caught up with her. DNA analysis confirmed the hand belonged to Elira Bens, and though the rest of her remains were still missing, the amount of blood found at the scene indicated she had died there. The charges were updated accordingly: first-degree murder, tampering with evidence, and unlawful disposal of human remains. Zireen was arrested the very next day while hosting a live-stream skincare event in her home. Viewers watched in shock as police officers entered the frame, handcuffed her on camera, and escorted her out of the house. The video went viral within minutes. Her fans, once fiercely loyal, began deleting their support posts. Sponsors terminated contracts. Influencers who had once begged to work with her now distanced themselves completely. The public turned overnight. During the initial interrogation, Zireen maintained her innocence. She claimed she hadn't seen Elira in weeks and had no idea how her remains ended up in the spa. She suggested the evidence had been planted, but investigators weren't swayed. They had the footage of her car near the site where Elira's vehicle was dumped. They had her messages to Elira urging a secret meeting. And now they had a body part in her basement. As she awaited her preliminary hearing, more disturbing discoveries emerged. Digital forensics recovered deleted security footage from a corrupted hard drive. While incomplete, it showed the unmistakable outline of two women entering the spa late at night. Only one was seen leaving. In another clip, Zireen was seen carrying several containers down to the basement over the course of several hours. She was alone, dressed in black, with gloves on her hands. Inside her mansion, investigators found a collection of burner phones, encrypted flash drives, and large sums of cash stashed in fake bookshelves. One of the flash drives contained spreadsheets, labelled with initials, chemical codes, and sales figures that didn't match her public financial statements. It appeared Zireen had been operating a hidden business, possibly involving illegal product testing on volunteers in exchange for untraceable payments. The biggest revelation came when forensic experts identified traces of human tissue in 3 separate containers found in the freezer. This suggested that Elira may not have been the only victim. Authorities began reopening other cases: former employees who had gone missing, whistleblowers who had disappeared under strange circumstances. Suddenly, Zireen Volda wasn't just a fraud or a killer. She was potentially a serial offender. The media frenzy intensified. Headlines speculated wildly, calling her everything from the spa killer to the butcher of Coral Heights. Protesters gathered outside the jailhouse. Victims' families began speaking out, sharing stories of betrayal, injuries, and unanswered warnings. Zireen's life of luxury had collapsed in spectacular fashion. Despite overwhelming evidence, she requested a high-profile defense attorney and planned to plead not guilty. But public opinion was already cemented. In the eyes of many, she wasn't just guilty. She was monstrous. Someone who had used her beauty and charm to hide a disturbing truth. As the trial loomed, more secrets threatened to emerge. The question now wasn't whether Zireen Volda was guilty. It was how many lives had been destroyed in her pursuit of perfection. Zireen Volda's trial became one of the most closely followed legal events in the country. Every major news outlet covered the proceedings daily, and social media lit up with every courtroom update. The once-adored entrepreneur now sat behind bulletproof glass, her hair tied back, her face stripped of makeup. Without the glow of her brand's products or the illusion of perfection, she looked like a completely different person. Tired, thin and hollow-eyed. Reality had finally begun to set in. The prosecution came prepared. They presented a timeline constructed from digital records, surveillance footage, GPS data, and witness testimony. They painted a picture of a woman who would stop at nothing to protect her empire. The most compelling witness was forensic pathologist Dr. Laramie Kest, who confirmed that the amount of blood in the spa basement indicated Elira Bens had died from blunt force trauma and significant blood loss. Her injuries suggested she had been struck repeatedly, with a force and pattern consistent with a metal object. The murder, the expert explained, was not quick. It had been brutal. Next came Colt Brenshaw, the former lab technician. He took the stand reluctantly, visibly shaken. He described a conversation he'd had with Zireen weeks before Elira disappeared, in which she allegedly asked if it was possible to erase organic material without leaving a trace. He admitted he hadn't fully grasped her meaning at the time, but now realized the gravity of the situation. Colt's testimony added a chilling layer of premeditation to the crime. Prosecutors also introduced the messages recovered from Elira's laptop. These included emails and texts documenting her intent to expose Zireen, with timestamps showing she was preparing to submit files to the FDA and media. One email, sent just hours before she vanished, read, "If I disappear, it's her. All of it. I have copies hidden, and she knows that." That email sent shivers through the courtroom. The defense, however, fought hard to dismantle the narrative. Zireen's lawyer argued that the evidence was circumstantial, that there was no footage showing the actual murder, and that the presence of Elira's remains in the spa didn't prove who placed them there. They suggested someone could have framed Zireen, perhaps Colt himself, or a disgruntled employee seeking revenge. They also tried to question the chain of custody for the containers found in the freezer, hinting that evidence could have been planted. But then came the turning point. A hidden backup server from Zireen's home security system was uncovered by a cybersecurity analyst working with law enforcement. On it were several corrupted but restorable video files. One of them showed Zireen dragging a large plastic container down the spa hallway, visibly straining under its weight. Another showed her returning hours later with blood on her shirt, glancing repeatedly toward the camera before unplugging it. That evidence shattered any remaining doubt. With her defense in shambles, Zireen became increasingly erratic. She began refusing food in jail, demanded new lawyers, and filed complaints about her cell conditions. Jail staff reported outbursts, periods of screaming, and paranoia. In court, she often stared blankly at the floor, ignoring proceedings. Mental health professionals were brought in to assess her condition, and while she was found mentally fit to stand trial, they noted signs of extreme narcissism and emotional detachment. Public interest in the trial reached a fever pitch. Protesters rallied daily outside the courthouse, holding photos of Elira and signs demanding justice. Former customers of Glow Sanctum launched lawsuits claiming health damages and fraud. The brand was pulled from all shelves and its assets frozen. What had been a beauty empire had disintegrated into scandal, ruin, and death. By the time closing arguments were made, the jury had little deliberation to do. The evidence was overwhelming. They found Zireen Volda guilty on all charges: first-degree murder, obstruction of justice, unlawful disposal of remains, and running an illegal enterprise. As the verdict was read, Zireen didn't cry. She didn't speak. She simply stared ahead, unmoved. But those who watched closely saw something different in her expression. Not fear, not regret, something colder. Like the reality hadn't quite hit her yet, or maybe it had, and she just refused to accept it. The sentencing of Zireen Volda was scheduled for early morning in a packed courtroom. The atmosphere was tense, charged with emotion from families, reporters, and former clients whose lives had been entangled in the illusion she sold. Cameras were not allowed inside, but outside, news vans and protesters lined the streets of Coral Heights. It wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about witnessing the final fall of a woman who had built her name on deception, manipulation, and cruelty. When the judge entered and called the courtroom to order, everyone held their breath. Zireen, dressed in a simple beige prison uniform, was brought in by two officers. Her once famous hair was tied back tightly, her face pale and expressionless. For the first time since her arrest, she showed signs of realization, not through tears or pleas, but through silence, as if the weight of what she had done had finally settled on her shoulders. The judge read through the charges once more, outlining each one with precise detail. First-degree murder of Elira Bens, obstruction of a federal investigation, abuse of corporate power, tampering with evidence, improper disposal of human remains. The judge emphasized the cruelty, the premeditation, and the lack of remorse shown throughout the case. Then came the sentencing, life in prison without the possibility of parole. The courtroom erupted, some in relief, some in tears. Zireen did not move. She was escorted back to a maximum security facility where she would serve her sentence. But it wasn't until she entered prison that the true weight of her reality began to bear down. No velvet robes, no cameras, no sycophants, only 4 grey walls, daily head counts, cold meals, and the constant noise of other inmates. Here she was not Zireen Volda, the face of Glow Sanctum. She was inmate 43179. In prison, her past meant nothing. Her name carried no influence. The guards treated her like everyone else. The other inmates, many of whom had followed her case on the news, were not impressed. Some feared her, others mocked her. She kept to herself, refused socialization, and rarely left her cell. The mirrors in the prison bathroom were made of scratched metal, and for a woman obsessed with her appearance, it was its own cruel punishment. Within weeks, her mental state began to erode. She stopped attending meals. She refused medications. Prison psychologists tried to intervene, but Zireen would barely speak. She wrote long, rambling letters that were never sent, talking about purity, perfection, and betrayal. At night, she would sit silently, staring at the corner of her cell. For hours, she had entered prison with pride, but pride doesn't survive long in a place designed to break you down. Back outside, life moved on. Elira's family held a private memorial service, burying the small remains that had been recovered. The FDA launched a crackdown on unregulated beauty products, citing Zireen's case as a warning. Former employees of Glow Sanctum came forward with stories of toxic workplace culture, manipulation, and abuse. Civil lawsuits followed, and the once billion-dollar brand was officially dismantled. Its name became a cautionary tale. Years passed, and Zireen faded from public memory. No new pictures, no headlines, no final interview. Her name became something people referenced in true crime documentaries and business ethics lectures. In prison, she was eventually transferred to a psychiatric unit after repeated incidents of self-isolation and breakdowns. She stopped acknowledging the outside world. It was as if she had created a new reality in her mind, one where she was still in control. But the truth remained. She had destroyed lives, and in doing so had erased her own. The woman who had once promised eternal youth and beauty had become a ghost inside grey walls, her legacy stained with blood. Reality hadn't just hit her. It had crushed her, and there was no mask left to hide behind.